So we are pretty much almost 100% certain that Islam Makhachev will now be moving up to fight Jack Della Maddalena for the welterweight title. And it's funny because I've been seeing, all the memes prior, all the memes now of people being sad that we're not getting Islam versus Ilya any longer. And look, I get it. I do think, obviously, Islam-Ilya is a super, super interesting fight. But I gotta be honest, I don't quite ascertain this same opinion as many others. I honestly think that JDM versus Islam is the way better fight. I guys gotta be honest with you. I think it's more interesting, and I think it's more interesting because against Ilia Topuria, Islam will have to use aspects of his skill set that we've already seen him use before, that we already know he's absolutely elite at. And I think the primary one is how evasive and how safe he is on the back foot. Of course, right, Islam Makhachev on the back foot, evading punches, he is so fucking good at that. Obviously, Volkanovski, I would say, 88% of his first fight against Islam was him hitting nothing but air. And honestly, it was the same thing in the Charles Oliveira fight. Now, obviously, Islam does not have a significant height or reach advantage, but Oliveira's game is to go after you, to pressure you, to get in your face, to close the distance. And again, we saw how elite Islam was at evading, moving, entering with punches, exiting brilliantly, and Oliveira did not land a single meaningful punch. The Davi Ramos fight, same exact thing. Islam's head movement on the back foot against Davi Ramos was incredible. And again, Ilya versus Islam is very, very interesting. Do not get me wrong, but we're just going to see Islam use those elite skills again, pretty much. But against JDM, we're going to have to see Islam use skills we've never quite seen him have to use before. Weight-wise, I don't think there's going to be a significant difference between JDM and Islam. Now, JDM on fight night weighs about 189, according to the athletic commissions. Islam Makhachev says he doesn't get up past 182, but that he also stays very disciplined with his diet. So if he just eats in a slight surplus, he could easily get up to around the same weight. But JDM is a little bit taller, a little bit longer, and he does a tremendous job maintaining range with the jab, with straight shots. He's also elite at boxing in the pocket, as we saw against Amir Muhammad. So again, now we have to see Islam use skills we're not really used to him seeing. We have to watch Islam now have to close the distance. We have to watch Islam get on the inside against somebody in JDM who to me is just right behind Ilia Topuria as the second best boxer in the UFC. But it's honestly more than that. Like, JDM's boxing is elite, but he's also just so ungodly well-rounded. He has very good kicks. His grappling is very, very good. He does an amazing job scrambling. We saw such improved takedown defense against Amir that wasn't there prior. Like we talked about, right? JDM, because of his high guard, had an issue of guys beating him to his hips and getting taken down. But against Amir Muhammad, he completely switched up his game and relied more on head movement and would drop his hands when Belal would pressure so he could dig underhooks or use frames to defend the takedown. So, of course, it looks like JDM is very capable of evolving, changing his game as he needs to. So, look, I think this could be a very tough fight for Islam. And the question is, how exactly does he match up to this kind of style of opponent? I think there's a few key things we have to look at. Of course, first things first of the boxing, right? I've always said that Islam has very, very underrated boxing. I've said that so much that at this point, I think his boxing is just properly rated. At this point, I think we all know how good of a boxer he is. I think the closest fight we can potentially look at here is the Dustin Poirier fight. And Islam overall outboxed Dustin Poirier. Now, the first thing I would like to address is whenever I say that, people chime in and go, no, you're confused. Islam actually sucks at striking. He's very, very mid, but there's a takedown threat. It's the takedown threat allows him to masquerade as an elite striker where he's actually just very mid. That's not their exact wordage, but you know what I mean. And look, hogwash. I just got to be honest with you. It's complete hogwash. I think that obviously, when somebody does have very good takedowns, it does change the dynamic of striking. If you overextend with a right hand, if you miss badly, of course, right, you're giving your opponent the opportunity to beat you to your hips, and now you're going to get taken down. But there were so many moments in the fight with Dustin Poirier where him and Islam are striking in the pocket. All right, in the pocket, not at range, in the fucking pocket. And Islam is landing double jab uppercuts. Islam is using very good head movement to slip Dustin's punches and land counters. Here, he throws a same side hook to the body and then an uppercut upstairs like fucking Mike Tyson. Islam just legitimately has good eyes, good timing. He does a good job at seeing punches coming and setting up counters. Again, right here against Dustin Poirier, again, slips the shot, grabs the clinch, lands a clean knee upstairs. This is just very good striking. And not to mention, like we talked about earlier, right, how good Islam is defensively, all right? The reason why Oliveira did not land a single meaningful punch on Islam wasn't because of the takedown threat. The reason why Islam honestly outstruck Volkanovski over 5 rounds wasn't just purely because he was scared of getting taken down the whole time. Again, right, when Khabib fucking feints a takedown and then chains a overhand and lands it cleanly, that's a sequence you can look at very particularly and go, oh yeah, well he feinted the takedown in order to land a punch. The takedown threat allowed him to land a strike. But just to take an entire fight of striking and then just go, well, no, but he was scared of the takedown the whole time, so that's the only reason. It doesn't count. I mean, that's nonsense, all right? Islam absolutely displays very, very good striking. However, I do think that Islam has his work cut out for him against JDM. And I think the big issue is the way that JDM can maintain range with his jab and his teeps. Dustin Poirier did land quite a few jabs on Islam, just popping it out there, popping his head back. JDM, again, taller, longer. Honestly, he has a better jab. He can also throw teeps. He can do a very good job maintaining space against a shorter, not as long Islam. But of course, right, Islam did show really good head movement against Dustin Poirier. I mean, the very first sequence of that fight was Islam slipping Dustin's punch, landing a counter off of the slip, and then landing an entire combination in close, right? So he's capable of slipping and getting on the inside. But, you know, Dustin Poirier does have a tendency to get kind of stationary and to shell up. That is why Dustin Poirier has had, you know, so many wars throughout his career. You know, Eddie Alvarez, Dan Hooker. Dustin can just get kind of stationary. JDM has really good head movement, really good counters off the back foot, counters on the front foot. He'll trade with you in the pocket and probably get the better of you there because, again, I think he's right behind Ilia Topuria as the best boxer in the UFC. I think it is very difficult for Islam here because no matter where the fight is, I don't think he's as good at striking as JDM is. Honestly, I would say that Islam should try to be more kicking heavy in this fight because of how dangerous JDM is with the boxing. And I also think that because JDM uses a lot of head movement and keeps his hands down when threatened with a takedown, that could be a good time to sneak head kicks upstairs. The problem is, though, Islam primarily uses kicks more so when he's fighting an orthodox opponent. When he fights a southpaw, he just doesn't really kick at all. Now, JDM isn't a pure southpaw. He switches stances back and forth very fluidly. So, I don't know, but I think that the less boxing for Islam, the better, and I think he needs to mix up the strikes. But no matter what, I think he's just a step behind in this area. I've got to be honest. I think JDM has very good leg kicks. Islam, at times, has shown to be susceptible to leg kicks against Volkanovski because he uses so much movement and so much footwork. The leg kicks can be there. You know, JDM also has very good high kicks, spinning wheel kicks, apparently, he can also throw. And no matter what, I do think he's kind of a step behind in that area, and he's going to have to hunt for the takedown. The problem with that is, I don't think Islam's pure wrestling is spectacular. Now, this is a very difficult concept for people to comprehend. I said in my last video that Islam is not as good of a wrestler as Belal Muhammad, and some people get really upset when I say that, but you gotta understand there's a difference between grappling and wrestling. All right, wrestling is a very specific grappling skill set. Obviously, Belal Muhammad comes from a wrestling background, and that's why you see him shoot double legs. He can chain that into high crotches or knee taps or a variety of takedowns. Whereas Islam Makhachev comes from a sambo judo background. He's got good foot sweeps. He has good takedowns and trips up against the fence, but just his traditional wrestling out in the open isn't spectacular, and that is why Dustin Poirier's corner throughout the fight was screaming at him, do not get backed up. Stay out in the open. He can only take you down up against the fence. Obviously, that ended up not quite being true at the very end of the fight, but I mean, they were right. For the most part, Islam did struggle taking him down out in the open. Now, against Renato Moicano, I think Islam did have a very good cross-body single-leg takedown. So look, point is, he can wrestle, but it's not his specialty. What makes Islam's grappling a problem is just how well-rounded he is. He does have good wrestling, but he also is elite from the clinch, very good back takes. He has very good submissions. He can just do a lot of things on the ground. So, how does he match up to JDM in the grappling? Well, of course, the big question is getting in on takedowns. I think what he needs to do is he needs to get on the inside, of course, right? He needs to threaten with strikes, and as JDM begins to lower his hands expecting a takedown, that is where Islam starts coming up with high kicks to bait JDM's guard to come up, and that's what's going to allow him to get to his legs. Now, if Islam can get deep in on the shot, he can absolutely finish the takedown. Now, again, easier said than done, but as long as he can do that, he can finish the takedown. JDM has very, very good scrambles. Of course, right, he is now a master at the just stand up curriculum, so back takes will be difficult, but, Islam can threaten with the Kimura, he can threaten with front headlock chokes, he can do things that can force JDM to be defensive, and he can use that to chain back takes together. The problem is, though, is that JDM has Craig Jones in his corner, who at this point, there's just no question, if you want to be a master at shutting down somebody's grappling game, you work with this guy. It did wonders for Volkanovski in the first fight. Obviously, it did wonders for JDM against Belal. It's going to be hard no matter where Islam takes this fight. Islam, right, when you look at the Renato Moicano choke, I gotta be honest, Renato kind of shit the bed a little bit. If you're going to end up in a front headlock position with Islam, just fucking grab one of his hands with both of your arms and just fucking hold on for dear life. You have to know a Darce choke is coming. Moicano just didn't even fight the hands, and I think he shot the bed there. I think that Craig could 1,000% prepare JDM for Darce defense and back take defense. So, I mean, that seems like a somewhat difficult path to victory relying on the submission. If I were working with Islam, what I would tell him to do is we're slipping on the inside and we're clinching. We're trying to knee to the body. We're trying to hit foot sweeps. We're trying to shove him and run him up against the fence where Islam's takedowns become elite. I think the clinch game is a really big advantage that Islam is probably going to have. I don't think JDM is going to be significantly stronger than Islam weight-wise. They're going to be about the same. And this is just an area where Islam skillfully has the advantage. I mean, this is his specialty, coming from Sambo and Judo. I mean, to me, I just really think that Islam, has his paths to victory. He has his strengths that he can use in this matchup. But all of it, to me, is an uphill battle. Belal Muhammad is known for his cardio and his pace and his ability just to maintain this marathon pace on you. But JDM, all 5 rounds, just kept up with him. I think it's going to be really difficult to fatigue JDM. I think that, he has all the skills and all the right people to work with here to, again, just make this an uphill battle. But the important thing you have to remember, like I mentioned at the very start of the video, is just the fact that Islam will have to show skills that we've just never needed to see him use before. And I think it is very possible he does make some very key adjustments, and he does change his game in certain ways so he can exploit where he does have strengths in this matchup when it comes to the control and the back takes and the submissions. Again, just for me, the best way I can sum up this fight for Islam is an uphill battle. I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to.